Weak, Devour the Dead is the second full-length album from Terrifier, a Vancouver area, British Columbia-based thrash metal band, who began very much in tune with the classic speed thrash metal zeitgeist as it became bigger in the early 2000s. I think they formed around 2003, which was really the spark of when the new school of old school thrash metal kind of kicked back, and that wave carried for about the next 10 years. You don't hear or see much from this style of band anymore these days, especially not the leaders of this style back in the day, because it was fairly well worn out. Now, that's not where these guys started necessarily. They were leaning more towards a speed metal sound, which had a lot of hints of traditional heavy metal in it, and their original work under Skullhammer had a lot of attitude. There's a little bit of Razor in there, I think, for my own ear, but they were clearly fans of the Bay Area stuff, and they sort of flipped a switch. Some members changed, and by the time their first full-length album came out in 2017, Weapons of Thrash Destruction, their sound had changed closer to what they are now. And before I get into that, we'll just hit a song so you can see that this is definitely that modern era of thrash metal.
It's a fatal deathmatch. The only way to survive is a trial by combat. What else can you do? It's a fatal deathmatch.
Now, while this might be a modern era thrash metal release, it does have the classics in mind. There's a bit more substance here than I find in groups like Evil or Warbringer, in the sense that this isn't just plainly cutting into the Bay Area's biggest hits, but there is some more aggression there, which might come from the grooves of Megadeth albums. It might have some Creator or especially some Exodus. There's a lot of Exodus influence in the 2017 album, and there's quite a bit here as well. So that's their standard, is sort of this mid to late 80s thrash metal, but modernized. And what I would say about this record is it's even more aggressive than the last one. The sound is a little bit more raw than the last one. So if you're familiar with that album, think of this as something that is maybe slightly lower budget in terms of the actual render, but maybe overall more listenable, in the sense that it's just an all-out attack at the riffs, and that's probably what you want if you're a thrash metal fan in 2013 who doesn't have a lot to choose from. I think that's sort of the reality of me rating this quite high overall, is that there aren't a lot of bands doing this. There aren't a lot of bands doing it well. And for that reason, Terrifier not only stand out as persistent and with some conviction in what they're doing, but they're writing memorable songs, and that counts for a lot when there just isn't a lot of thrash that's inspiring most people left and right these days. So I think the big comparisons I would make are Besieged and Decapitator. Now, Besieged is, frankly, a little bit more of a Beneath the Remains style thrash metal band, and Decapitator lean into the Bay Area quite a bit on their second album. And that's kind of the intensity that I think is right for gauging what this album is, which has a little bit of death thrash influence, but they don't go full on like Creator style aggression with it in terms of like that late 80s sound. So there's some of the more finessed shredding and leads are gone from this record. They've gone down to they've lost one guitarist in the interim between records, but that still works out because the spirit of the band is still there, the riffs are still there. That's mostly what matters, and the leads that are here are not bad or all that different. There's just maybe fewer of them, and they're less ornately presented. So I found that more listenable. I found it very direct. I thought it was a great, just aggressive thrash metal record with a very loud, but maybe not quite as clear as the last record sound. And that's what I was looking for. That's what I wanted. And so that's why my score is a very high recommendation, is because this hit the spot at the right time. It is up to a high standard, and it has sort of a personality to it. Whereas a lot of records that look like this and sound like this don't necessarily have that personality. I think these guys have sort of nailed enough of those things to where I felt like I was listening to a 2023 thrash metal record. So I was into it. Go ahead and read the review to see why, and check out the album to see if it's your kind of thing when it releases in a couple of days.
Afraid, running